Hello, my name is Jada Barr. I'm a secondary English education major at North Greenville University, and today I'm here to present my senior portfolio as well as my senior thesis, which is a discussion on the need for a Christian literary theory. First of all, my portfolio is a combination and culmination of all the work that I have done throughout my college career. My portfolio starts out with some job application materials, such as my resume and cover letter. I also have some thank you for interview letters, as well as my list of references. Following that, I have my diplomas and certifications, which include my high school diploma, my college degree, and my teaching certificate for South Carolina. Following that, I have a list of my skills as well as a list of my achievements and my awards that I have won throughout my college career. Some of these include being vice president of Beta Delta, which is an international teaching society, as well as being a junior marshal and being on the dean's list for all 4 years of my college career. Following all of those things, I have my culmination of writing. The first section is purely academic, and I have included several of my things from all throughout college. So it starts out with some work from my freshman year of college. Obviously, this is a little bit older work, and the point of this, including the freshman work as well as the senior work, is to show growth and development through my writing skills. I have work from my first English class at North Greenville, which was Introduction to Multicultural Literature, as well as all of my sophomore work for American Lit 1 and 2 and British Lit 1 and 2. And then after that, I have some more work from literary research and literary theory, which were classes throughout my junior year. And finally, I have my Faith and Literature essay, which discusses the need for a Christian literary theory, which we will be discussing later today, but that's also included in my portfolio. After the academic section, I have a creative section. In this section, I have my novelette that I wrote for my fiction writing class. It is a 5-chapter short story, and that is included, the full novelette. And after that, I have some of my poetry that I have written throughout college. Some of it is purely for creative purposes, but some of it was also published in the Mountain Laurel, which is North Greenville's art and literary magazine that is published once a year. So 4 of the poems that are in my portfolio were published in the magazine, and the rest of them are just for creative purposes. Overall, my portfolio was a great way to look back and see all of the growth that I have made throughout college, through my writing, and I've been able to see that through the help of my professors and just through getting older and doing some more work, that my writing skills have definitely improved throughout college, and my portfolio is a way to show that. So after the portfolio, we kind of discussed a little bit about my Faith and Literature essay. My Faith and Literature essay is in the portfolio, but it's also here what we are here to discuss today. Basically, this essay talks about the need for a Christian literary theory. According to Leland Ryken in his book Windows to the World, literature gives shape and expression to our own experiences, insights, and values. This kind of pretty much shows that literature is an expression of the human experience, and it provides insight into the human experience. And because of this, a literary theory is needed to correspond with this indication that the human experience is universal. The most common literary theories that we kind of have right now are psychoanalytic theory, formalism, Marxism, that kind of thing, the more common literary theories. But while these are important, a literary theory that addresses and examines the spiritual nature of human existence is missing from literary canon. Susan Gallagher and Roger London address the evaluation of literature in their book, Literature Through the Eyes of Faith, and they say, Such evaluations should go beyond awareness of a text's subject matter and language to include scrutiny of its treatment of the subject, its moral and ethical perspectives, its vision of life, its context within the larger frame of literature, and its artistic achievement. Basically, this means that the analyzation of literature should go beyond simply the text, and it should look at all of the aspects that they stated in that quote. Its point in canon, the moral attributes of the text, and artistic achievement. A literary theory that's based in religion would not only allow for the understanding of the spiritual aspects of humanity, but it would also allow the root and cause of human existence and actions to be recognized. While many people might not consider a Christian literary theory to be viable, it is important to note that the field of literary criticism, even though it's embraced postmodernism, should welcome a multitude of voices, because that is the whole point of postmodernism, to listen to everyone's voice. So I think that a Christian literary theory would be accepted in the literary community, just because it would allow for, a new voice to be heard. And, within the world of academia, there is a common apprehension towards the introduction of a Christian literary theory, but I think that it is a voice that needs to be heard, and it is a place that needs to be filled in our literary theories. So I have created my own literary theory based on the ideas that I have read about from Leland Ryken, Susan Gallagher, Roger London, T.S. Eliot, all of the people that I've kind of mentioned so far. I have developed my own literary theory based on their ideas. So this theory has 3 tenets, and each tenet has its own strategies. The first tenet of my proposed Christian literary theory addresses the depravity of humans as a whole. The tenet basically states, because of Adam and Eve's original sin, all of humanity is born with an innate sinful nature that results in selfishness, profanity, and sexual immorality. Basically, this tenet kind of points to the fall of Adam and Eve, and points to original sin as the basis for all sin that is committed today, no matter how it's exemplified, whether that be through selfishness, profanity, sexual immorality, anything like that. And this tenet is kind of proven in Bible verses such as Romans 5:12 and Romans 5:19, where it is stated, "Therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all have sinned. For as by one man's disobedience the many were made sinners." This points to the fact that original sin is the reason for all sin that is committed today. The strategies for this tenet are pretty obvious. Readers should look for characters who engage in sexually immoral behaviors, notice characters who seek personal gain over the well-being of others, and be conscious of characters' use of profanity throughout the work. The next tenet is, because humans are created in the image of a loving God, they have an inborn desire to love others and experience love. This tenet points back to the fact that the God who created us is a loving God, and he is a faithful God. Since we were created to be loved by God and to love him, we have a desire to love others and show others love the way that Christ shows love to us. This tenet is proven by 1 Corinthians 13:13, which states, "So now faith, hope, and love abide, these 3, but the greatest of these is love." And also Hebrews 10:24, which states, "And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works." Both of these verses point to the power that love has over humans, and the fact that humans were created to love, and those both ultimately affirm the tenet. The strategies for this tenet are a little bit less obvious than the first one, but they're easy to identify within literature. Readers should look for characters whose actions are driven by love, either out of love for others or to gain love themselves. The third tenet and final tenet for this literary theory is, because Adam and Eve were created for the sole purpose of serving God, all of humanity has a desire to find significance in their existence. Colossians 1:16 outlines humanity's purpose when it says, For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. This affirms the tenet because it shows humanity's true purpose, the purpose that God created us for. Finally, the strategies for this tenet focus on characters' actions regarding their search for purpose. Readers should look first for characters who are searching for meaning and identity. They should also notice when characters experience immense emptiness or a void in their lives, because that means that they're searching for their purpose and they're searching for the purpose that God has ultimately given them. And if they don't understand that purpose, then there will be a void in their life. So for this Christian literary theory, I have chosen to apply my theory to Kate Chopin's The Awakening. The first tenet is very, very identifiable within The Awakening. Any reader or critic of literature can become aware of the glaringly obvious examples of humanity's sinful nature at work within Chopin's most famous work, The Awakening. The first example of this tenet is Edna's selfishness. This is shown in the 3rd chapter of the book whenever Mr. Pontellier comes back from a night out and is talking to Edna, and the narrator states, "He thought it was very discouraging that his wife, who was the sole object of his existence, evinced so little interest in things which concerned him and valued so little his conversation." So basically, Edna's husband is trying to talk to her, and she really has no interest in talking to him. She has no interest in the conversation, and it shows how selfish Edna can be, because she's only really worried about herself. She's not talking to her husband, but she is talking to Robert, and the narrator states that when she's talking to Robert, each was interested in what the other said. So she's clearly having good conversation with another man who is not her husband, and this also takes into account her selfishness during this time. Also, another example of her selfishness is when Raoul, Edna's son, develops a fever in his sleep, and Mr. Pontellier comes and tries to tell her, and she's not interested in going to check on him because she's already in bed. She doesn't want to get out. She doesn't want to do anything that benefits anyone else except for herself. This is a selfish act because parents are supposed to care for their children and care for their needs, but Edna decides against her role as a mother in favor of her own well-being. Both of these are examples from the text of selfishness at work within a literary text, because just as humans are selfish, characters are also selfish within literature. The next example illustrates Edna's sexual immorality. Whenever she goes back to New Orleans and decides to move into the pigeon house and out of her husband's home, she has a sexual relationship with Alcée Arobin, and she has no concern for the ramifications of this sexual affair. She is only worried about her feelings and the fact that she's satisfied. And this shows selfishness and sexual immorality, both of which are parts of this tenet. There is not a true example of profanity within The Awakening, just because of the time that the book was written in, but obviously both of the tenets, the other parts of the tenet, which are sexual immorality and selfishness, both of these are glaring examples within The Awakening. In the same way that the first tenet can be identified within this text, so can the second. While Edna's acts are selfish and immoral, they also contain elements of the second tenet, the desire to be loved. Edna may not truly understand that her actions are a result of her desire to be loved, but if you examine this text through the lens of this literary theory, you can't help but understand her underlying intentions. So, first of all, Edna's marriage to her husband is an example of her desire to feel love in some capacity. When she's looking back on her life and talking about whenever she met him, the text says he pleased her and his absolute devotion flattered her. Basically, she wasn't in love with him, but he was good enough and he gave her attention and it flattered her. So she decided that she would be with him. And the text also says, she felt she would take her place with a certain dignity in the world of reality, closing the portals forever behind her upon the realm of romance and dreams. She had dreams about who she wanted to be and the life she wanted, but she settled for her husband because she thought that was the only way that she could feel loved. Also, the fact that she engages in these affairs shows that she has a need to be loved. First of all, she has a intimate relationship with Robert. It is unclear whether does become sexual, but is clearly emotionally intimate, and this goes back to her desire to be loved. And then her sexual intimacy with Alcée shows that she really wants to be loved, and she thinks that a sexual relationship with another man is gonna help her feel that way. So both of these affairs that she has on her husband both show that she desires to be loved because she's not feeling that from her husband as well. The third tenet shows that Edna is also, she's searching for her purpose. Similarly to the first two tenets, this is very identifiable within the awakening. Edna's thinking about her life as a wife, and it stated that she felt she would never, earlier the same place that we stated, she felt she would take her place with a certain dignity in the world of reality. She's searching for her purpose, and her purpose is, in the society she lives in, her purpose is to be a wife, and her purpose is to be a good mother. But she's taking this place with a certain dignity, and she's not actually liking the purpose that she has discovered for herself. She's very unhappy with her role as a wife and as a mother, shown through her actions towards her husband and her actions towards her children. Edna also tries to find identity within her relationships. Obviously, as we've stated before, she has her husband. She doesn't find her identity through him. She has Robert, her first affair. She doesn't find her purpose in him. And her third affair, or her second affair, Alcée, she doesn't find her purpose with him. She's trying to be satisfied, but she doesn't find that purpose in anything that she does. And by looking into Edna's search for a purpose within the awakening, critics who utilize this Christian theory are able to see that all of her ineffective attempts at finding a purpose for her existence always end up to be futile. Anything that she does and tries to do, they always fail her. Overall, I think that analyzing a text through using this proposed Christian literary theory demonstrates that without a Christian literary theory, readers will miss several essential aspects of textual meaning and interpretation, because no matter what anyone thinks, authors are always writing from the human experience, and characters will also experience universal things that everyone else experiences. And without a Christian literary theory, we can't see the spiritual nature of that experience. Overall, my portfolio and my faith and literature essay have both been beneficial aspects of my college career, and I believe that the implementation of a Christian literary theory into the common canon of literary analysis would be beneficial because it shows the spiritual nature of human existence. Thank you.